Hey Wargamers, today we got our first official preview of what is going to be in the new Tau Empire Codex, starting with the homeworld, starting with the Tau Sept tenets and some related stratagems. We also learned a few general things about what's going to be in the Codex and some major changes we're seeing, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we do though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead, hit subscribe, that way you don't miss any of my upcoming videos addressing every new development in the Tau Empire Codex release. So, let's get started. Let's start with the general things that we learned. There's a few general things, and then we'll talk about the Tau Sept specific stuff later. So the general things that we learned, one, and very importantly, the leaks that we talked about a couple days ago, link in the description below, seem to be more or less on target. So there are some deviations in the wording that are important that were not conveyed, or at least I didn't pick up on in that leak. So, you know, that little grain of salt that you took with that rumor or with that leak is being rewarded. So there is a slight difference in the print version and the rumored version. So there's going to be some surprises still. So that's good. The next thing that we learned is that, yes, hammerheads are becoming cheaper, more point efficient, supposedly. And that is something else that we saw in that leak, and it's probably going to be along the same magnitude as in the leak. You know, we're going to see about the same point reduction as rumored, which is good. It makes them sound like they're going to be a pretty competitive choice, which is nice. The third thing that we learned is the existence of a new stratagem for breachers. The stratagem is called Breach and Clear, and it's a one command point ability. You play it before you have a unit of breachers shooting at a target that is in cover. That's a key part there. It's not a universal stratagem. It has to be used against a target that's in cover for a unit of breachers. When you do that, though, they are able to re-roll their wound rolls. So if you have a bunch of breachers going in and are taking out a unit of, you know, let's say Dark Angels, Hellblasters, you know, just because they're terrible. If you're going in to take those guys out, having your breachers re-roll wounds, that's money. So for one command point, you can make a big difference. This has a couple different implications. One is that your opponent is going to be a little bit more cautious about deploying in cover because, yes, they're getting the benefit of cover for the majority of your army, but if they're targeted by breachers, they are going to have to deal with a larger number of wounds, and even though they have a better armor save, for one thing, it's breachers, so they're going to have a nice negative AP modifier to the weapon, but also, you know, they're going to have to deal with the extra number of wounds. So, you know, the benefit of cover may not be worth it if they know that they are exposing themselves to this new stratagem. That means that, conversely, your opponent can dupe you out of the benefits of the stratagem by just not being in cover. So having a couple guys outside of cover can make this stratagem ineffective. So, you know, there's going to be some give and take in using this stratagem, but overall I think it makes breachers a little bit more attractive just because it does really give them that oomph that you need. I like using breachers to go and clear out things out of ruins, and, you know, yes, this helps facilitate that process. Without this stratagem, breachers tend to have a hard time getting the right number of wounds through just because of the way that the wound table works. You know, they're going to be wounding a lot of things on threes, and they're just not going to have enough shots based on the unit size that I can fit inside a Devilfish. So being able to re-roll those wounds makes the whole Devilfish breacher team a lot more attractive and a lot more effective potentially. So this is actually a pretty nice stratagem. For one command point, it is situational, but, you know, ruins are all over the place. Cover is all over the place. So having this stratagem to dislodge people out of ruins seems like a nice benefit. It's situational, yes, but it's a pretty common situation. So overall, sounds like a good thing. All right, so let's move on to the Tau specific stuff. There are three things. We have the Sept tenet, we have some news about Long Strike, and we also have another stratagem called Focus Fire, which used to be a formation benefit, but is now a 3 command point stratagem. So let's start at the top. Let's start with the Tau Sept tenet. It is very similar to what we saw in the leak. Basically, you are overwatching and or using your For the Greater Good ability on a 5 instead of a 6. that's good. That's doubling the number of hits that you're getting, which is great. But there is a caveat that you have to be within 6 inches of another Tau Sept unit. So you can't have, you know, a single unit of crisis suits out in the middle of nowhere using this benefit when they're being charged. So they have to be near another Tau Sept unit. And, you know, hey, if you put down drones with them, maybe that's your solution, right? Your other unit of drones are your other Sept unit, so you can still be within 6 inches, but still be out in the middle of nowhere. But in general, if you have an isolated unit, it's not going to work. So it does reward castling and some modestly sized excursionary forces or scouting parties, you know, that are flanking or doing something like that. If you're going to deep strike with the Tau Sept, you want to bring drones or multiple units so that they can use this benefit. The second thing we learned was about Long Strike. His special suit basically allows him to treat marker lights as being 1 better than they are originally. So if you have 1 marker light on a target, it goes to 2. If it has 2, it goes to 3. You get the idea. For the most part, this is good. It allows him to use his seeker missiles more easily. It ignores cover more easily. Allows them to move and shoot at a ballistic skill of 2 up, basically his entire lifespan, because you know, he does have the Firecast Exemplar rule, which gives him +1 to hit already. But when he's down to 1 to 3 wounds, he's normally hitting on 4s. That Firecast Exemplar ability moves him down to 3, and now if we have 4 marker lights on something, moving them up to 5 with his special suit ability, now he's hitting on 2s. So Long Strike does a really nice job of always hitting on 2s, which is you know, we like that. That's good. That's good news. Especially if he's using a railgun, you need that reliability. So having the suit that does this, it's not a massive change, but overall it makes him a lot more reliable. All right, and the last part is the focus fire stratagem. It's 3 command points, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it is pretty expensive, but I think it's worth it in a lot of situations. What it does is if a Tau Sept unit wounds a target, which, you know, we should be doing, if you wound a unit, then you can play the stratagem, and all successive units from Tau Sept can add 1 to their wound roll. This is basically the Blood Angels benefit, but for shooting, and you can do it at range, obviously, for your entire detachment. So it's really nice. That +1 to wound makes a huge difference, especially considering the strength range of most of our weapons. Strength 5, Strength 6, Strength 7. These are all strengths that are kind of nerfed with the new way of doing wounding. For Strength 5, you know, you used to be wounding things on 2s, now you're wounding them on 3s if we're talking about infantry. For Strength 7, you're going to be wounding a lot of vehicles on 4s. Strength 6, you're going to be wounding vehicles on 5s. So you have this kind of range here where you're not quite doing as much damage as you think you would with that high strength of weapon. But if we add +1 to wound, suddenly Strength 5 weapons are wounding infantry on 2s. We are damaging vehicles on 4s. Same thing with Strength 7. Strength 7 is now doing wounds on infantry with 2s. You know, generally probably was doing that already, but, you know, whatever. But for vehicles, Strength 7 is now wounding on a 4 maybe. So a 4 or a 3. So this makes a huge difference in the ability of your units to take out high priority targets. So you're going to be using it not for taking out that unit of cultists or anything like that. You're going to be using it to take out your knights, your primarchs, your big bad monsters. This is the stratagem that you use to really put the nail in the coffin on a high priority target early in the game. Especially you're going to want to use it early in the game because you're going to be able to use more units to fire with. If you're using this turn 5, you're not going to have that many units to actually capitalize on the stratagem. So you do want to use this early on in the game to take out that high priority target. Just one and done. Make sure it's out of the game early on, and that way the rest of your army can work as it's supposed to without having to deal with that big bad unit. So this is a nice way to counteract, or at least give us a little bit of a leg up on armies that have this one massive unit that is a big bad guy. So again, like Primarchs is what I kind of keep thinking of, or Knights, or whatever you want. But if your opponent has this one beat stick unit, this is your solution. Just blow it off the board turn one using focus fire, and that's going to make the game go a lot better for you. Now it is 3 command points, so it's expensive, but like we said, you're going to be using this against your high priority targets. You're not going to be using it for the Gribblies, for the Scrubs, for the Flak, for the Screens. You're not going to be using it for any of those guys. You're going to be using it for the big bad guys. And your opponent probably won't have very many of those. They'll have 1 or 2, and this is a stratagem they're going to use 1 or 2 times based on the cost. Now, you might be able to use it more than that if you're spamming detachments, particularly if you're incentivized to do so by a 1 commander per detachment limitation, which has been rumored. So if that does come to fruition, then maybe you are going to have a few more command points and you're going to be able to use this more than once or twice. But in general, I think you're going to use it once or twice early on in the game to take out high priority targets. So all that said, what's my general impression of this preview? It's good. I think that this looks good and makes Tau seem more attractive than just the Sept trait and the Warlord trait that's been leaked made it seem. The focus fire stratagem, I think, is really an attractive stratagem for the army, and I think people might tend to shy away from other Septs if they can use this stratagem effectively. So for that reason, I think that this is good. This makes Tau Sept look better and makes me more optimistic about all the other cool stuff that we're going to see in the Codex. So I think there's a lot of hope. I think there's going to be some really cool stuff in this Codex. It may not be top tier. It may not be your Elder list, but it's going to be up there. It's going to be something that you see, I think. So this is good news. I'm excited for it. Hopefully you're excited about it. But either way, let me know what you think of this preview in the comments below. And of course, happy wargaming. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. I want to thank all my patrons over on Patreon. Your support really makes a difference for me and I really appreciate it. Special thanks goes out to NoExcusesPanda, Paul Leuders, TauOswell, Andy Young, Peter Benjamin Parker, Deverson, and Giovanni DiMaggio. You guys rock, thank you. If you liked this video particularly well, head on over to Patreon and consider joining our community over there. Thanks as always, and happy wargaming.